Sometimes I look at someone's face and realize I can't read a single thing from it. No warmth, no reaction, just a quiet stillness that feels strangely familiar. And the truth is, when I say they're emotionally cold, I often recognize pieces of myself in that description. It's almost like I'm not observing another person, but a reflection of who I had to become. A quieter, safer version of me, one who learned that showing emotions often leads to getting hurt. For a long time, I thought I was simply not emotional, but psychology tells a different story. Research from the University of Wisconsin found that people who experienced emotional neglect early in life show reduced activity in the anterior insula, the brain region responsible for sensing and interpreting their own feelings. When I learned that, something clicked. I realized my emotional numbness wasn't a flaw, it was an adaptation. My brain wasn't broken, it was protecting me. Turning down my emotions wasn't a choice, it was survival. As I grew older, that survival mode followed me everywhere. I became calm on the surface, but chaotic underneath. I kept my distance from people even when a part of me desperately wanted connection. I stayed logical because feelings felt unpredictable. I avoided vulnerability because vulnerability once cost me more than I knew how to handle. And little by little, I drifted through life like an observer watching everything from a safe distance, participating only when it felt impossible to get hurt. And once that truth settled in, something else became clear. This coldness didn't appear out of nowhere. It was shaped slowly, quietly, by the moments that taught me emotions weren't safe. So if I really want to understand myself, I have to trace back where those layers began and look at how I learned to shut parts of myself down long before I ever realized I was doing it. There was a time when I honestly thought being emotionally cold was just who I was. I told myself I was naturally distant, naturally quiet, the kind of person who just didn't get affected the way other people did. But when I finally let myself look back, I realized that wasn't always true. There used to be a version of me who felt everything deeply, a version who didn't hold back. And somewhere along the way, that version slowly faded. Emotional coldness didn't show up in one day. It built itself over time, like armor I didn't even notice I was putting on. I now understand that emotional coldness is rarely a trait. It is a response, one shaped by the environments we grow up in and the experiences we go through. When I look back, I see moments where expressing how I felt only led to confusion, punishment, or dismissal. Times when vulnerability wasn't met with comfort but with consequences. Those moments taught me something powerful. If emotions lead to pain, then shutting down is safer. And once that belief takes root, it doesn't just influence how we act, it shapes who we become. Psychology explains this in ways that suddenly make my own story make sense. A study from the University of California, Berkeley found that chronic emotional invalidation during childhood is strongly correlated with the development of avoidant emotional processing in adulthood. That means when our feelings are consistently ignored, mocked, or minimized, the brain adapts by disconnecting from them, not because we don't have emotions, but because the body is trying to protect us from overwhelm. In a strange way, emotional coldness becomes the nervous system's way of saying, "You've been hurt enough." Growing up like that, you learned to quiet yourself before anyone else could. You got used to thinking instead of feeling, staying calm on the outside even when something inside you was falling apart. And as time went on, people around you saw that calmness and assumed it was strength. They thought you didn't care much, that you were the logical one, the person who didn't get bothered. But honestly, logic wasn't your natural way. It was just the safest place you knew. The more you depended on that shield, the more distance grew between you and the people you cared about. Not because you didn't want closeness, but because you didn't know how to open up without feeling exposed. You watched friendships, relationships, connections slowly fade, not out of choice, but because expressing your feelings felt impossible. Getting close meant letting someone see the parts of you you've spent years trying to hide. Emotional coldness became your comfort zone, familiar, predictable, and even though it protected you, it also kept you from the kind of connection you secretly wished for. Over time, you started to notice the empty spaces in your life. Moments that should have felt special felt flat. Places where joy should have been were strangely quiet. And instead of asking yourself, "What's wrong with me?" you started asking the real question, "What happened to me?" And that question opened a door. Understanding why you became emotionally cold doesn't mean you're making excuses. It means you're finally seeing the truth. You're not broken. You adapted, you survived, and from that understanding, from that little bit of compassion toward yourself, you can finally start learning how to feel again. Not in a big, dramatic way, but slowly, gently, one step at a time. You might think your emotional coldness has always been a fixed part of who you are, something built into your personality. Maybe you've even told yourself, "That's just how I've always been." But if you look a little closer, really pay attention, you'll see that your coldness wasn't born in you. It was built. It grew slowly, layer by layer, shaped by the moments when showing your feelings didn't feel safe. And when you start peeling those layers back, you realize something important. Your coldness isn't just one thing. It comes in chapters, in versions of you that showed up to protect you each time the world pushed a little too hard. It was never about being heartless. It was about surviving. And once you understand that, your whole story starts to make a lot more sense. There were times when you became the frozen survivor, the version of you that went numb not because you didn't care, but because caring felt like stepping into fire. When someone got too close, asked too much, or touched an old wound, your body didn't wait for your mind. It shut down. Silence wrapped around you like armor. A study from Columbia University found that adults who experienced early emotional neglect develop hyperactive threat responses, leading them to withdraw emotionally even in harmless situations. That's not lack of feeling. That's your nervous system trying to save you. There were times in your life when you slipped into logic mode without even noticing. Instead of talking about how you felt, you broke everything down like a problem to fix. Instead of giving comfort, you gave solutions. People might have seen you as cold or disconnected, but deep down, you know why you did it. Thinking felt safer than feeling. Logic was the only place where you didn't get overwhelmed. It wasn't that you didn't have emotions. It was that emotions felt too intense to handle, so you managed them the only way you knew how. There were also phases where you acted strong because you felt like you had no other choice. You became the independent one, the "I'm fine," the "I've got it," the one who didn't need help from anyone. Others thought you were confident, even fearless, but inside, that strength came from fear. Fear of being judged, fear of being abandoned, fear of needing someone who might not stay. So you chose yourself every time, even when choosing yourself felt painfully lonely. And then there was the quiet watcher in you, the part that studies people before you let them close. You listen to tone, you notice patterns, you pick up on every small shift, not because you're paranoid, but because you've been hurt before. Your silence isn't emptiness, it's self-protection. It's you making sure you don't repeat an old wound. When you take a step back and look at these versions of yourself, the logical one, the strong one, the quiet observer, the survivor, you start to see the truth. Your emotional coldness wasn't a flaw, it was protection. A shield you built from moments when warmth didn't feel safe anymore. And once you understand that, something inside you softens. You stop blaming yourself for shutting down. You stop telling yourself you're too cold or too distant. Because the truth is, You didn't become this way due to a lack of emotion. You became this way because you felt everything more intensely than people ever realized, and you had no one to help you carry it. Your coldness was never the absence of feeling. It was the weight of too much feeling, held alone for far too long. There are things you do quietly, almost hidden from the world, that reveal a truth you rarely admit to yourself. You were never truly cold. You were guarded. And that difference matters more than people realize. Being cold means you don't feel anything. But guarding yourself, that comes from feeling too much. From emotions so heavy and so overwhelming that you didn't know where to put them. You didn't shut down because you didn't care. You shut down because you cared so deeply that it scared you. And somewhere inside, there's still a part of you hoping no one notices just how soft your heart actually is. One of the first signs is how quickly you pull back when someone starts to care about you. Not dramatically, just a few inches at a time. You respond slower. You make conversations shorter. You keep things light. People might think you're losing interest, but the truth is you're doing what your nervous system learned long ago. Protect first, trust later. Research published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology shows that individuals with avoidant attachment activate the brain's defensive circuits when relationships become emotionally close. Your distance isn't rejection, it's reflex. Another sign is that you rarely show emotion in real time. You feel things deeply, intensely, but only when you're alone. You cry in private, you break down when no one can see. You process everything internally because vulnerability in front of others still feels unsafe. You don't suppress feelings, you postpone them. You protect your heart the same way people shield a wound that isn't ready to be touched. There's also the way you overthink kindness. When someone compliments you, shows care, or gives more than you expect, your brain doesn't say thank you, it says why. You search for hidden motives, inconsistencies, or future betrayals, not because you're cynical, but because you learned that affection often came with conditions or consequences. You're not suspicious by nature, you're cautious by survival. Then there's your habit of choosing independence, even when connection would feel good. You convince yourself you prefer being alone. You tell people you're low maintenance, simple, unbothered. But deep down, independence is the only space where you don't fear disappointing anyone, where you don't have to explain yourself, where you don't risk needing something you're afraid won't last. A subtle sign that your heart is guarded is how deeply you feel for others, even though you rarely show it. You notice everything, the crack in someone's voice, the shift in their energy, the sadness behind their smile. You may stay quiet, but your empathy is high definition. You care silently because caring loudly once led to hurt. And finally, there is the heaviness you carry, the quiet grief of someone who wants closeness, but isn't sure how to safely step into it. You look at people who open up easily and wonder what it must feel like to trust the world without flinching. You're not incapable of love. You're not emotionally broken. You're a human being shaped by wounds that asked you to survive before they ever gave you time to heal. Once you recognize these signs in yourself, something soft begins to happen. You stop calling yourself cold. You stop shaming the parts of you that shut down. Instead, you begin to understand that your guardedness was never a flaw. It was a shield built by a version of you who did everything they could to stay alive inside. You might think healing should feel warm, comforting, like finally letting the sunlight in after years of darkness. But if you've been emotionally cold for most of your life, healing doesn't feel like warmth at first. It feels like danger. And that's the part almost no one talks about. When your heart has been shut down for years, the first signs of feeling again don't feel beautiful. They feel like a threat. Not because you're weak, but because your body learned a long time ago that emotions were unsafe. According to a study published in Frontiers in Psychology 2017, people who experience long-term emotional suppression show heightened stress responses when positive emotions return because the nervous system confuses vulnerability with danger. That's why healing can feel more terrifying than the pain you lived with. Think about it. You've spent years learning how to be fine. You learned how to keep a straight face, how to act normal, how to protect yourself without making it obvious. So the moment a real emotion comes back, a wave of sadness, a spark of care, a hint of hope, it feels like a crack in the armor you built. And cracks are scary, even if they let the light in. Healing starts by confusing you. You suddenly care about things again, and caring feels unfamiliar. You start noticing small aches in your chest, small shifts in your mood, moments when someone's words hit deeper than they should. You begin to feel exposed in situations where you used to be numb. You might even pull back, shut down harder, because the emotions coming back feel too much. But this isn't you failing. This is the system that once protected you struggling to understand that you are no longer in danger. Healing also brings grief not just for what happened to you, but for the years you spent disconnected from yourself. You may find yourself grieving memories you never formed, relationships you never fully entered, versions of yourself you never got to be. This kind of grief is quiet, invisible, and heavy, but it's also a sign that you're thawing. Feeling again is painful, but it's also the first proof that you're waking up inside. And here's the strange part. As you heal, you might miss the numbness. You might long for the quietness inside you because it felt easier than feeling everything. That doesn't make you broken. That makes you human. Numbness was safety. Feeling is life. And life will always feel overwhelming at first. The truth is, healing isn't about forcing yourself to open up or tearing down your own walls overnight. It's about slowly teaching your nervous system we're safe now. It's about learning that emotions aren't threats, they're signals. They aren't explosions, they're messengers. And you don't have to run from them anymore. So if healing feels scary for you, remember this. It's not because you're cold, it's because you're thawing. And thawing takes time, but it's worth every difficult moment because it's bringing you back to the version of yourself that you deserved to be all along. If you've been emotionally cold for years, feeling again doesn't start with warmth or peace. It starts with fear. The fear that if you open even a small door in your heart, everything you've been holding together will finally collapse. You worry that if you let yourself feel sadness, it will swallow you. If you let yourself care, someone will break you again. If you let yourself be vulnerable, you'll lose control. But learning to feel again isn't about falling apart. It's about learning how to stay grounded while your emotional world slowly wakes up. The first thing you need to know is this: your numbness was never weakness. It was your survival system doing its job. According to research from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, 2016, people who experience long-term emotional suppression showed decreased activation in brain regions responsible for emotional processing. In simple terms, your brain literally learned to turn off the volume to keep you safe. So when feelings return, of course they come back. Loud, sharp, confusing. Your system is rebooting. That doesn't mean you're breaking. It means your emotional circuit is turning back on. When old feelings start rising again, grief, sadness, frustration, you might panic. Not because the emotions are dangerous, but because they're unfamiliar. You've lived so long inside emotional silence that any feeling feels like too much. You may cry unexpectedly, get irritated easily, feel a strange heaviness in your chest. These aren't signs of losing control. They're signs of thawing. Just like when your hand warms after being numb in the cold, it aches before it feels normal again. Emotional thawing works the same way. To feel again without falling apart, you have to learn something you were never taught: emotional pacing. You don't have to feel everything at once. You don't have to fix every emotion the moment it shows up. Give yourself permission to take emotions in small, manageable doses. If a feeling rises and overwhelms you, pause. Place your feet on the ground. Notice 3 things around you. Take 1 deep breath. You're teaching your nervous system that emotions are not threats, they are waves. Waves rise, waves peak, waves pass. You've survived far worse than a feeling. Another important truth: you don't need to understand every emotion to feel it safely. Many people who shut down emotionally become overthinkers, trying to analyze every sensation in their chest. But healing isn't analysis. Healing is tolerance. Let the feeling be there without dissecting it. Sit with it for 10 seconds, then 10 more. You don't heal by forcing clarity. You heal by building capacity. The more time you spend with emotions without resisting them, the more your emotional muscles grow. And yes, connection will feel difficult at first. When someone gets close, you might freeze. When someone shows care, you may want to run. When you start caring, you may feel exposed. None of this means you're failing. It simply means your attachment system is recalibrating. You're learning to distinguish between past danger and present safety. Stay slow, stay gentle. Let relationships unfold at a pace that doesn't overwhelm your nervous system. Most importantly, remind yourself daily, feeling doesn't break people, unprocessed pain does. The emotions coming back now are not here to hurt you, they're here to free you. They're the parts of you that were pushed into the dark, finally asking to come home. And you don't need to welcome them perfectly. You just need to not shut the door on them anymore. So if you're learning to feel again, and it's uncomfortable, intense, or confusing, that's normal. You are not falling apart. You are reorganizing. You are relearning. You are becoming someone who feels, not someone who breaks. Feeling again is messy, but it is also the first real proof that you're coming back to life. And nothing about that is failure. It's healing. It's growth. It's you. You didn't choose to become emotionally cold, but you can choose how you heal from here. Little by little, you're learning that feeling again won't break you. It will bring you back to yourself. And if any part of this spoke to you, stay with me. There's more to learn, more to understand, and more healing ahead. Hit subscribe, share this with someone who might need it, and let's keep moving forward together, one soft step at a time.